Hello and welcome to another episode of the Socialistics podcast, Social Media Agency Stories. I am Jason Yormark. Excited to have another new guest today that I've been looking forward to talk to. We're going to be talking about personal branding, and I could not be a bigger proponent of that. It's been such a huge factor in my career, and it's opened up all kinds of doors. So I am really excited to speak to Megan MacNeill. Welcome to the show, Megan.
Hey, Jason. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we just kind of jump right in? Tell me a little bit about your background, where you started, and what's brought you to what you're doing today.
So my accent is Scottish, if anyone's a bit confused, and I'm actually living down in Western Australia. So I moved here about 8 years ago, and I guess I was fresh off the boat and I was just willing to take any opportunity I could. My background had been events and marketing back in Scotland, and when I came here, I started at WA Farmers Federation, and I thought, I'm a country girl anyway, and I've kind of moved to Perth's not a big city, but I've moved to a city, which is big for me. And I've kind of thought, I don't really want to work with farmers. This will be boring. Like, this is not what I came to the big smoke for and moved halfway around the world for. I stayed there for 5 years and it was amazing. I had the best opportunities and met some of the most amazing people. But the biggest thing that I learned was, because it's a not-for-profit, was that there was never enough money for anything. So I was always building up the important people, my presidents, my CEOs, my chairs, whoever I had, to try and get the message out. Because if I had put it out from the organization, not many people were really interested. But if I said, my president, Dale Park, has got this to say, people were interested, I could get him a platform, I could get him in front of people. And the same happened when I've been at 3 not-for-profits since starting my own business. And it was the same thing that was happening over and over again. So when I decided to start my own business, I thought I was going to do outsourced marketing. I thought that's what I was going to do for not-for-profits and small businesses. I get started and I go straight in. And the first thing I do, I'm working with a lot of lawyers and accountants, and I go straight for the partners and I try building up their personal brands as opposed to their firms. Yeah. And I was listening to a podcast one day and it talked about personal branding, and I thought, that's what I do. I don't do marketing as in general marketing. I actually do personal branding, and it's what I love. I love building people up so that they can help other people, because it's not about being internet famous. It's not about being a Kardashian and getting as many likes on Instagram. It really is about getting that person in front of the right people so that they can influence them or help them or be a motivation or inspiration, whatever the reason is. But it's getting the right people in front of the other right people. Mm-hmm. So I decided to niche, and now I do personal branding. So that's my story and how I got here. That's the short version of 8 years.
Awesome. So how long? Is it just Relevant Megan? Is it just kind of running the business under your own name, or does it have its own brand? Or
yeah, so the business started as Relevant. My social media handles, like on Instagram and stuff, are Relevant Megan, but it's just Relevant because the whole point was that I help you be relevant. Yeah. Try and get rid of all that stuff that is irrelevant, because we get so caught up in all the fluff, when really, when you peel it back and you just concentrate on what it is you're trying to do, it's actually not that hard. And it's not that hard to just be you. And that's what your personal brand is. And, if you're doing anything else, it's creating actors and actresses, not really just you.
Well, I want to talk about all of the personal branding stuff, but I'm also fascinated. I'm always fascinated by people's their business and what it looks like. And so is it just you? Do you have a team? How do you go about, who's the ideal client for you? Just kind of give me a little bit more insight into your business and its world.
So there's me full-time in the business, and I have someone who works part-time in the business with me, mm-hmm. and I outsource a whole load of other bits and pieces mm-hmm. that wouldn't really warrant a full-time person or isn't the skill set of me or my part-timer. I'm a massive advocate for outsourcing. I just think if it's not your thing, just mm-hmm. offload it as quick as possible, because it gives you more time to do what your thing is. Yeah. My ideal client is actually probably, if I think about the majority of my clients and probably the clients that are my favorite clients, maybe not class ideal, but my favorite clients, they would be males that are in their sort of 40s They
Hmm.
they're successful. They're either already CEOs, CFOs, or they're business owners, etc. There's not an awful lot more room for them to go up in the organization or the company that they're in. But it's more about what happens next. They don't want to be forgotten. They want to build up this legacy piece. Or some of them actually want to start something new, and it's more about giving back or a passion that they have, and they use all of that knowledge and experience and that network that they've built up over the last 20, 30 years, and they focus that on what their new passion is, because
Hmm.
they're not as financially motivated as someone who's looking, because I have a couple of people that have just started businesses or are looking for new jobs, etc. And it's more about that financial gain and being able to get the next step, etc. They've ticked a lot of boxes already. They're now
Hmm.
looking to build up that influence and actually be remembered. And it's not an ego trip, because I always say personal branding, if it's about your ego, you're doing it all wrong. But it is about not being forgotten, because nobody wants to have done something and then, once they've retired, well, were they even here? So there's a
Yeah.
lot of that.
That's so interesting because, well, your ideal client was, you practically described me. I don't know that I'm ready to be thinking differently because I'm still pretty excited about what I'm building, but I can relate to that. Like for me, it's like I don't want to be like forgotten, and I want to leave something. So for me, that was writing. I wrote my first book a couple of years ago. It was kind of a bucket list item. I'm like, I've created something that will now live forever. So I totally relate to that line of thinking. What's really interesting to me though is, how do you have clients that do they know what they're looking for in this regard? Like, are they looking for you and your help, or is it one of those things where you have to kind of get an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody to talk about what you do, and they're like, oh, you know what? Yeah, that's exactly what I need. I'm kind of curious what that dynamic is like for you in terms of business development.
It's a little bit 50-50, to be honest. To start with, it was quite hard, because I think when you say personal branding, people shy away because they think it's all about the ego, and they don't want, even if they would like to build up their brand and be a little bit more known, a lot of people don't want to admit that, because it seems a little bit, as if they're sticking their head out and they'll get shot down type thing. And it's not that. Whereas I'll have a lot of conversations just randomly at events where people have seen what I'm doing on LinkedIn and will say, I've been thinking. And then the conversation goes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that I've worked with previously in the past, they know some of the people I'm working with, so word of mouth, and they'll say, "Oh, I've seen what you've done with John.
Mm-hmm.
John's not a real, I don't think I have any clients. No, I've got no clients called John, but John has
Yeah.
said this, and I've seen what's happening
Yeah.
with John's profile. I see him everywhere now," that kind of thing. So it's been slow and steady, which is quite nice, but it is definitely a hurdle that personal branding's not. I mean, I didn't even know what personal branding was a year ago. I thought I was just doing marketing. So to try and get an executive or someone who, is very much in their field to understand what that little niche part of marketing is also a bit of a hurdle, but they all do understand that they need to be able to have more influence, whether it's to their board or to the outside world or to their stakeholders, or if it's that they're starting something new. Like, we've got someone who's starting a new show at the moment, but he's got a massive following from his business, but it's going in a slightly different direction, and he's been like very surprised how many people have now followed and grown from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it comes in all different shapes and sizes, to be honest.
Gotcha. When you're working with a client, what percentage would you say of time? Like, obviously, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, they got to bring some work to the table, right? Because it's them. It's right. Like when you're working with them, how much of it is you and your team doing the work versus just consulting them and guiding them and pointing them in the right direction?
Totally depends, but I try and think of it like I'm a personal trainer for your personal brand. You can go and do it on your own. There's nothing stopping you. Just like you can go to the gym on your own, but it's so much easier when you've got someone there directing you and actually showing you how to use some of those machines that you wouldn't touch because you're a bit nervous of them. I help people use platforms that they wouldn't normally use, whether that's podcasting, LinkedIn, Instagram, or if it's just networking. Like, I'm working with someone at the moment who has been fairly successful in her career and cannot network. She really, really struggles with that. So that's what we're working on at the moment. So it's when I think of different platforms, some of them are online, some of them are offline, but it is the exact same as a personal trainer where I'm just helping you get there a little bit quicker. I'm helping you avoid some of the mistakes because I've seen them a million times with other people trying them. And I'm getting you onto machines that you would otherwise avoid.
Yeah, no, I like that. For your clients, are they typically short-term relationships, long-term? Do they have a start and an end, or do they kind of continue ongoing? What does that look like in terms of your client load?
Yeah, so they have a minimum of 3 months that they have to do to start
Hmm.
with, and
Yeah.
at the end of that, it's up to them whether they continue or not. And generally, I've got people that just go back onto rolling, so we just continue on again.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I've got some that will then go down to quarterly, where they have sessions quarterly just to check in to make sure that we're still hitting our goals, because that accountability part is a big part of it.
That's a good segue. I was just about to ask you, what does success look like? Like when you talk about working with a client, what are the success metrics? What are the things that you look at with them that show that the work that you've done together hits your goals or has been successful?
For me, it's seeing them happy, because I know that sounds funny, but again, we'll go back to personal training. If you're a personal trainer, when you know you've got a client that's happy is when they're feeling fit and healthy. I want people to be feeling confident. And that's the main thing. So you might be very successful in your business and you're very, very confident in doing what you do and running your business or running your department, whatever it is that you do. But you might not be that confident in actually putting yourself out there. I get people to a point where they're actually comfortable coming onto a podcast like this, and they're no, what do I do? You do it day in, day out, but you can't string a sentence together because you're so worried about what people are thinking and stuff. I get people to a point where they go, well, this is what I do and this is why I do it, and I'm really quite comfortable telling you that. And it's and more than that as well, just to have feeling like what they're doing is making a difference, because you do get caught up in the sort of 9 to 5, whether it's your own business or not. It's monotonous. It's ongoing. When you build your personal brand, you have really interesting conversations, and that's what I love when my clients come back and say, I went to this event and this person came over and spoke to me because they had seen this article I wrote, or they saw me on this podcast, or they saw me on that news thing that you got me on, whatever the thing is that we've been working on. And that's what I love when they come back and say, people are starting to notice. I'm having conversations offline about my online activity. That stuff, that gets me excited because it excites them. It feels good. When someone comes up to you and says, I've
Mhm.
seen your podcast, or I've listened to your podcast and I really liked episode 12 that was about whatever, you go, oh, you listen? That's nice. It makes you feel good. So that's what I want. And that builds into, that will then build into something more and get them to their goal of whatever it is that they're after.
No, I dig it. All right, before we get into the meat and potatoes of personal branding, and yes, that's my horrible attempt at an Irish pun. That's my shot there. I want to share a story about what thrust me into personal branding, just because I think it's interesting and it reinforces why it's such. If there's one thing that I want the audience to take away from this, is that if you're not investing resources or time into your personal brand, you need to immediately rethink that. So as I told you at the beginning, I was at Microsoft for about, I think 5 or 6 years, but in year 4 or 5, and back in 2009, Microsoft did something that they never did before, which was lay people off. Never did that in the history of the company. They laid off 5,000 people, and I was unfortunately one of the people on that list. Not because of being, a crappy employee or anything along those lines, but just because, much like you discussed earlier, my job was outsourceable. Marketing is very outsourceable. And I was devastated because I had moved to Seattle from Chicago for Microsoft. They were at the top of my list. I want to work at Microsoft. That's my favorite company in the world. Nothing could be better than to work at Microsoft. And I was great at it and I loved it. And my world was shattered because I got laid off. Now, it was offset a little bit by a very generous severance package. So I had about a year, roughly to figure things out. But still, I was devastated. And I had a blog, I had a personal blog. It was silly. I wrote dumb little stories and funny little things, never thought anything about it. It was just this thing that sat out there. And the next day, I wrote a blog post about being laid off from Microsoft and how it impacted me, and just this story, that came from the heart. And then published it. I knew no one had ever read it. It was just kind of like a therapeutic thing for me. Next day, I wake up, my blog article somehow got picked up by CNET, and it got picked up in all these places. And in 24 hours, my blog had 10,000 people on it, like that, from like nothing to 10,000 people reading this story about this guy who got laid off of Microsoft. And I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, oh my God. And then the next day I had 9,000 and 8,000. Like I had this trickle effect of people still going to read it. I'm like, it just clicked for me. I'm like, I've got this platform. All of these people are coming to read this article. I need to do something fast to leverage this. So I immediately within like a couple of days, redesigned my website, starting just talking about my experience of finding a new path, immersed myself in social media. And I realized in that moment, like my career, it's up to me to carve a path for myself. Like I can't count on, getting all the jobs that I want and resumes. And I need to carve a personal path for myself. And redid the website, started blogging regularly, started talking about my journey, immersed myself in social media. And that from there, this was 10 years ago, and just worked on my own personal brand. And I got rehired back at Microsoft because of that. People would say in the interview, I read your blog. I saw what you were doing individually. You put yourself ahead of the list of everybody else. Resume is a resume is a resume. And it was that clicked for me that I'm like, okay, now, this is the thing that I have to commit to regularly. And it's been such a huge component to my career ever since then. So I wanted to put that out there to kind of give a real world example of how impactful it can be.
That's a massive shift as well. When you are no longer a number, you're a name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what building your personal brand does. You are no longer a number. 5,000 people were let off from Microsoft. There's 4,999 of them are still numbers. You're a name now. Yep. And that's the difference. And I don't think that's egotistic. I think it's just getting yourself out there and getting ahead, because there's loads of people that are quite happy to just bumble along and do their thing and be a number because they just want to work. They work just to live, and that's fine. A lot of people aren't ambitious, but if you are ambitious and you have big dreams and you've got big goals and you want to help a lot of people, you want to accomplish a lot of things, you need to be different. You need to not be a number. You need to be a name.
Yeah, I was hired back to launch social media for Office for Mac, the last physical version of the software. And the hiring manager specifically said, I remember this day in the interview, she said, we are hiring you because of what we read on your blog. Like we were able to get an insight into you and who you are through your writing. That's why you're getting this. And like from then I was just like, ever since then, like I've always made sure that that's been a thing that I've continued to do. So it can be very powerful. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about, what is personal branding? Like, let's start with, let's say I'm somebody, well, I am that somebody, but somebody that maybe has not invested any time in it and hasn't thought about it, but realizes now maybe this is something I need to think about. Like, what are the first steps, or what are the things that they need to be thinking about in terms of, how to kind of approach this and kind of prepare themselves to go down that path?
Shift your mindset for a start, because you have a personal brand whether you like it or not. Mm-hmm. Your personal brand is just what people think, feel, and say about you when you're not in the room. And if they're not thinking, feeling, or saying anything about you, then what's the point? And if they are thinking and feeling and saying things that aren't quite correct about you, then that's where you've got the opportunity to actually be turning that story around. Personal branding isn't about putting your whole life on show. It's not about putting your personal life out there. I mean, this is where the Kardashians have really hurt us, because, think that it's we've got to see everything, the good, bad, and the ugly, when we don't. Mm-hmm. You've got to give a little bit of your personality in your personal life, because if not, you're just another person that's, you're an accountant, you've gone through school and, you can do numbers. Great. But what makes you different? Why are you going to attract better clients for my firm? Or why are you going to excel at something because you've got a personal interest? Or how are you going to niche down own because you've got contacts in a specific niche that no one else in the organization has, etc. So you've got to leverage off what makes you special. But you've got to remember, if you're not branding yourself, someone else is. So think about what it is that you want. Think 3 or 4 years down the track. It doesn't have to be, oh, what do I want next month? Think long term, because I can bet you that whatever happens between those 3 or 5 years, you're not going to get to that place. Some people will, but a lot of people will end up somewhere completely different because opportunities come in front of you because you start popping your head up. People start offering you things that you never even thought of, things you never imagined that you would get. And that comes back to this being a name, not a number. Because if I'm looking to hire someone, a really high percentage. I know in Australia it's something like 75% of jobs that are actually advertised after a certain level. You've got your entry levels jobs that every Tom, Dick, and Harry puts in a CV for and hopefully gets. But once you get to a sort of middle management and above, most of those jobs that are advertised, they're only advertised because they have to be. Legally, they have to be advertised, but they're actually earmarked for someone else. Someone else has already had a tap on the shoulder. Someone in management has gone, do you have someone that would fit for this role? Or we've created this new role. Do you know anyone with these skill sets? Or, Susan's leaving. Do you know someone that could replace her, etc.? So they're already looking within their network, and it's that word of mouth, and that's also who am I seeing popping up on LinkedIn, or who am I seeing on Facebook, or who am I seeing at events continually that demonstrate that they would be a good fit for this. So you're putting in CVs and you are just, again, a number at this point. You actually want to walk in, same as what you did, walk into that interview and you've pretty much got it because they've seen so much of you elsewhere that it's a given. You need to really screw up that interview that you don't get it. And if you're looking for a job. If you have your own business, it's likewise. If you go in cold every time trying to get a new client and selling what it is that you do, it's really hard because you're starting from scratch every single time. Whereas if you build up your brand enough and people have a semi-idea of who you are and they like you, they resonate with you, they gravitate towards you, and you're offering something that will benefit them and you're demonstrating that in a level and in a way that they can see in their own comfort without actually having to sit there with you and have to sit, because that's awkward. People, if they don't want it, people don't like saying no and they go, oh, we'll get back to you and stuff. You want people to be sitting across from you going, okay, well, how do we get started? Because they know so much already. And that's what building your personal brand is all about when you're a small business or you're looking for a job. Big companies like Microsoft, etc., yes, they will invest a whole load more in the Microsoft brand. And people worldwide know what Microsoft is. We don't have that luxury or that budget as small businesses or as individuals looking for jobs. So treat yourself like a business. Your logo is your face. Mm-hmm. And you need to get that logo out there and you need to get it everywhere. It needs to be showing up at the right events in person. I know with COVID at the moment, that's difficult for a lot of people, but make sure that you're doing that. There's a lot of virtual events. Make sure that on LinkedIn that your profile is more like a landing page than an old resume. Because if you're using it like a resume and it shows all the schools you went to and it shows all the different tasks that you do at your job, boring. I want to know what it makes you different. What makes you good to be part of my team, whether it's external because I'm outsourcing to you or whether I'm taking you into my company. What makes you special? That's what we're looking for.
I like that. What is some of the, if I'm somebody that's considering kind of going down this path, what can I expect in terms of, what are the things I'm going to have to do? Where am I going to have to spend my time? What type of additional work am I going to have to be crafting? What does that look like from a responsibility standpoint to set somebody up with realistic expectations about what it takes to be successful with this?
You need to get a little bit uncomfortable, which over time will become comfortable because that's the whole point. Same as we go back to the gym. First time you go, oh my God, do your quads hurt? Yes, they do. But over time you go and you do the same squats and all of a sudden that's just normal to you and you enjoy it. That's the same with building your personal brand. When I'm trying to get people to go on, because I think LinkedIn's the best place for anyone right now. Instagram and Facebook, yeah, great fun, lots of pictures, etc., but so saturated, and trying to get any kind of real reach is very, very difficult. So if you enjoy it, fine. But if that's part of your strategy and it's like the only part, you're in trouble. LinkedIn at the moment has just so much organic reach. And if you're connected to the right people and you're setting out your content properly and you've got your landing page, which is your profile, set out, then brilliant. It's about using that platform and using it continually. Now, if over here in Western Australia, we have been very lucky and we've not got a lockdown or anything. So a lot of my clients are still going out to physical events, which is good. It gets them in front of the right people. LinkedIn is where we then take that stuff. Your offline activities need to be brought online. So even though you're in lockdown just now and everyone's probably going, oh, well, I can't get to events, so that doesn't count for me. Are you telling me for the last 10, 20, 30 years, however long you've been working, you have not been doing things? You have not accomplished things. You have got oodles of content. You should be repurposing it, regurgitating that stuff. Because your story you've just told me, that's fantastic. That blog can have another run right now. You can do something for your business at the moment about personal branding and how your story around it, which you can add on to this podcast that we're doing. Like there's loads more added there, and you haven't had to leave the house because you can't. So there's all that kind of stuff. And it is about putting your name out there, putting your face out there, your logo, your face, etc. And that for some people is really uncomfortable. And I get that. A lot of people don't want to look like they're showing off. You're not showing off. All you're doing by not telling people what you've accomplished and what you can do and who you're connected to is you're stopping them from being able to use you as well, because you could be a benefit to them.
Yeah, I can relate. So I've always been an introvert, and one of the hardest things for me is to talk about myself, because I'm like, who cares? Why does anybody care about me or what's going on with it? So it still is uncomfortable to talk about myself or accomplishments, but painfully I've learned that these are the things that you have to do. And I think the thing that drove it home for me personally was, now that I have a team, I have a team of about 9 or 10 people, like, no, you need to do with that for them. I mean, if you can't flip the switch in your mind to do it for yourself, you owe it to them to leverage your stories and your experience to benefit them, because by doing that, you attract more people to yourself, to your business, which inevitably is going to be good for them. So that was my way of kind of getting out of a comfort zone about talking about myself, that made it real for me. And I'm sure others can kind of relate to that too.
And no one else will do it for you.
No,
Apart
for
from
sure.
your mom.
Absolutely not.
I mean, my mom probably would, but she can't be everywhere either. So
yeah, well, especially now it's tough because it's like, we're kind of isolated, and, we don't have the opportunity to go to events and interact with people on a physical level. And, now it's as important as ever. If anything that comes that's good for that, they'll come from this is that people realize, the importance of leveraging digital platforms to grow their businesses or their personal brands. Because, if anything, people are going to be online more. More people are going to be working from home. I think businesses are starting to realize, what, people are actually can be more productive at home. This can work. So I think the world's going to change dramatically in that, which is only going to make it more competition. And as an individual, you have to do these sorts of things to separate yourself from other people. So,
make
but
sure
your
online presence exists.
For sure. You mentioned LinkedIn, which is a fascinating platform to me. I spent a decent amount of time on it. I have lots of connections, but I have personally failed miserably at it. I get a lot of inbound messages and whatnot, but it's a lot of noise for me. So I'm kind of curious, like, let's start with, what are your top 3, like, what are the top 3 things that somebody should be thinking about or doing when it comes to using LinkedIn successfully when it comes to a personal brand? Some things that come to mind.
It's funny you say that. I did a podcast interview a couple of weeks ago with someone, and he said to me, I want you to come on and speak about LinkedIn. And I was like, oh, great. As soon as we started the interview, he says, I hate LinkedIn. Why should we use it? And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about why you hate it.
Mm-hmm.
And he hated it because when he was scrolling through his feed, he was seeing a load of people sitting in front of Mercedes, going nice red Ferraris, etc., nice cars, being like, be successful like me. And he was seeing lots of people's meals, using it like Instagram. And he was seeing lots of people bragging about how awesome they were. And he was seeing people sharing way, way too many intimate stories. Now, for me, that's not what LinkedIn is all about. Instagram is where you go and put your fancy cars and your fancy photos and your breakfast. Go and put all of that on there. Facebook is where you connect with your friends and your family, and you put anything that's like very personal to you. If you have got a feed like that, of course you're going to hate it. Of course you're going to be put off because it's a lot of noise. It's a load of crap. There's 3 buttons at the top of when you're scrolling through your feed. There's 3 buttons at the top of that person's name. When you click that, there's a whole lot of options, and one of them is unfollow. Mm-hmm. Unfollow people that don't serve you. If they don't make you happy and they're not providing value and there's not great content coming from them, clear out your newsfeed. I can guarantee as soon as you clear out your newsfeed, you'll start enjoy being on the platform more, because people will start showing up that weren't before because they were hiding behind all of this other rubbish that's keeping going through. And the thing is, when you've got a lot of people that are in pods as well. So when you've got this crap content going out, they're also in these pods. So they perpetuate it because they like it and they comment on it and everything. Let them do their thing, because honestly, whatever you do not get into a pod, because it's just false metrics. We're not there for vanity metrics at all. I'm more interested in the behind. I can sometimes have a post that will have only 20 likes on it, but I can see that about 20,000 people have looked at it, because people on LinkedIn are really passive. There is not a lot of good content on there. So if you can build your profile so it's like a landing page and actually converts people, and it says exactly what you do and it's attracting what you want, and you can put out some fairly regular, decent content. And when I say regular content, your regular doesn't have to be my regular. It just has to be your regular. So if you decide that you're going to post every single day, and then all of a sudden you just can't because you run out of content, and I don't know how anyone can have decent content every single day, then the algorithm's going to shoot you in the foot, because it goes, well, hold on, you're not posting anymore. If you've decided that, twice a week is good for you, do it. Most of my clients post once a week, twice if something exciting happens that they've got a second post. And that's enough, because the magic is in the engagement, and it's all about networking up. So if you're following the right hashtags and you don't always have to be connected to these people, but you're following the right people that are perhaps already have very strong personal brands within your industry or your niche, or their potential clients, in that area. So I call that networking up. Get involved in the conversation. So when they're putting out content, add to it, get into the comment section, or have a skim through and see what other people are saying and see if you can reply, and you can actually have conversations there. That's when you start getting noticed, and people that will start connecting with you that you actually want to be connected with, as opposed to people who see, MD or CEO or whatever your title is and go, oh, that's the decision maker, I must connect with them and see if I can sell them my junk out of my boot here. And that's what you get. So just being a little bit more mindful with how you use the platform helps. Making sure that you've got the right connections on there. You can go through and cull your connections, but that means they don't see your content either. I think unfollowing them is probably the best way to do it. I know that when I do LinkedIn training with people and I show them how to remove connections, it's always ex-boyfriends and ex-girlfriends that go first. I've been wanting to get rid of them for years, but I didn't know how to without them seeing me do it. Yeah. So yeah, clearing up your connections, because that saying of you are the sum of the people you spend the time with, that's still true even if it's online. If you're consuming rubbish content, it's not good for your mind. If you put in, what you put in.
That's interesting. I may need some of your help, because I've taken a very not a different approach, but so LinkedIn for me and social media in general, my theory has been up to this point, if people want to follow me, go for it. Fine, whatever. Let's connect. You want to see my stuff? Okay, bring it on. I'll take everything I can get. And that attitude has done 2 things. One, I've grown quite a large following, no doubt about that. Which is fine. But now I have these streams of content that 90% of it is garbage, and I have absolutely no interest in, and it's noise. So that's a deterrent for me. I don't even want to go on LinkedIn as a browser or looking for information or engaging with people, because it's like 90% of it is garbage. Like I don't have time for this. So when you say something like that, it's very appealing to me. I would love for it to be a place where I could go and the stream that I see is relevant in conversations that I want to be a part of and be a participant in. But now I'm like, well, geez, I've already done this. I've got 7,000 connections. Like, can I really get back to a healthy, audience that actually warrants my time? So,
You
yeah,
can do you can do a couple every day where you're just unfollowing a few that just don't really serve you anymore. But the other thing you can do is on your profile, when people go there, there's either a button that says follow or connect. If it says connect, automatically they're just going to connect with you and send that connection, so it's a two-way stream. If you change it in your settings so that it says follow, people will, unless they know how to get to the connect button another way, they will just click follow. So it's that one-way stream where they're seeing your content, but you're not seeing theirs.
I
And
did
that,
do that. I
yeah,
read an
great.
article about that. So I changed that a couple weeks ago, and the number of connection requests that I get has definitely gone down. I don't know if I can still see how many people follow, but I did find that, which is interesting because it's like I had to dig a little bit for that. So I could see how 95% of people would never even think to do that. They kind of hide that.
Yeah, I don't think LinkedIn want you using that because it's
Right.
not the default and it isn't easy to get there. I was trying to do it with someone. I mean, I do LinkedIn training day in, day out all the time and we talk about it, and I couldn't find it. I had to go and Google it again because I was like, I know it's in here somewhere, but you've got to go into settings and down to something else. And yeah, it took a little bit of to find it. So there, yeah, LinkedIn obviously doesn't really want you to do that, but it'll really help you. It'll help you enjoy the platform.
Yeah. I need to get back to that. I mean, I've definitely need to figure out a way to make it more useful in that regard. What about profiles? What are some quick recommendations you make for people to have a more effective profile?
Have a really good headshot and make sure it's one where you're looking directly at the camera and you don't need to be a big cheesy grin smile, but you're smiling. Your eyes have to be smiling. No one else in the picture, no alcohol in the picture, no props, nothing else. Just a face, just you. It's the exact same person that someone would see if they were to catch up with you for a coffee or catch up with you on a Zoom meeting. Because there's nothing worse than seeing a picture of someone, then catching up with them and going, that's not the same person. It's the same as dating. If you're scrolling right and all of a sudden you go on a date and that person's not the same person, you feel a little bit duped, and it's the exact same in business. So make sure you've got a good profile picture, and then also make sure that that profile picture is visible, because you can actually hide it so that it's only your connections that can see your profile picture. I don't see what the point of that is, especially when it's a networking platform where you're basically trying to get out to as many people as possible and touch as many people that you don't know, that aren't part of your inner circle. So that's important. The other one is your headline. Make sure that it doesn't say CEO. Make sure it doesn't say Chief Executive Officer of whatever, because there's millions of CEOs out there and people aren't really looking for that. They want to know what it is that you do for them. So you're a CEO, fantastic. You're proud of yourself. Your mum thinks you're fantastic. But Joe Blogs, who needs you, doesn't care. They want to know what it is that you do for them. So make that headline count and make sure it says something that actually resonates with them. And also, when you're commenting or you're posting, the only thing, unless someone actually goes onto your profile, the only thing that they see is your headshot, so your profile picture, your name, and then that headline that you've got. That's like in the small writing at the bottom. So that will catch people's eyes. So make sure that you've got all of them. Obviously, you'd put your name in, so that's the easy part. But you've also got free advertising space on your profile, which I think is amazing because people are really visual, and that header that you have at the very top, make sure that that's something that actually resonates with people and actually shows them or tells them what you do very quickly. And that doesn't mean having a whole load of text on there. It also doesn't mean having a nice holiday picture on there, because unless you're in tourism, what's the point in having a nice landscape? I want to have something up there that actually tells people what it is that you do really quickly, because one, people are very visual. Two, we're very lazy. The likelihood of us scrolling down and getting too much more information, unless you've caught us at the very top, is slim. So make the most of that very, very top part of your profile, which is your head, your face, your personal logo, your headline, and your header.
Got it. That's awesome. And by the way, here's my personal beef I have. I'm going to put it out there. Maybe you agree with me, Megan, on this. You're not allowed to call yourself a CEO until you have at least 10 employees. Okay. That, to me, that's the rule. You're not a CEO until you have a large enough business. So many times I've seen people that will start an agency or a business and they will call themselves a CEO, which I think is really tacky. So
I agree with that. I don't think you're a CEO unless, well, I don't know if it's about the number of employees, but definitely you're not a CEO unless someone else has appointed you a CEO.
I think so. I mean, even generous with saying 10, it probably is more than that. I've never been comfortable with it. So I go with CSO, which is Chief Social Officer, which I think is, since we're a social media agency, it's kind of a play off of it. So, but
It's
yeah.
it's funny you say that because my last job before I started my business was as a CEO for a really small not-for-profit.
Mhm.
And every time, and I was offered the job as CEO, so it wasn't like I'd made the title or anything, but
Yeah.
every time I would say to people what I was doing, I would never say, "Oh, I'm the CEO." I would be like, "Oh, it's this ridiculous title for this tiny little
Yeah.
not-for-profit. Like it's a CEO, but it's not really because I mean, there's only four of us." And I would be apologizing for having that title. So it's uncomfortable if you're not
Yeah.
comfortable with having the title as well. So yeah.
I've always felt that way. I mean, I get it. Sometimes people just want to raise their profile. But it's interesting. I did a previous interview where we were having a really good conversation about one of the things that I learned, and this can relate to personal branding about authenticity, is when I first started the agency, I felt, oh, we need to make ourselves look bigger than what we are, because if we don't do that, then nobody's going to hire us. And it was quite the opposite. Over time, what I realized is like, there's a shift, especially in the agency world, is that companies actually like to work with smaller agencies. They're more nimble, they're more responsive, they're hungrier, they typically work harder. It's just an environment that a lot of businesses are really starting to like. That's not to say that bigger agencies aren't successful. Of course they are, but they're working with the Nikes and the McDonald's of the world. There's a ton more business out there. So authenticity has always been a huge thing for me. It's like you talk like who you are. Like, don't try to be something that you're not. Just embrace who you are, what you've done, and be transparent about that. And that is going to lead to bigger and better places.
But even if you do look at the big companies, you can see a shift there where they wanted to, if you look back in time, they wanted to look massive. They wanted to be the biggest. And you had a lot of small companies trying to look bigger than they were as well. Now you'll see big companies trying to look more local, trying to look a little bit smaller, and they put a lot more faces to it so that, even when you look at their marketing, they'll have staff members in it. Like, so you're putting a face to the organization when really most of the time they're probably actors or whatever, but that's fine. They are trying to put more faces and people behind their organization to kind of get traction as well.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. This has been absolutely fantastic. I love conversations that are fluid and easy, and this has certainly been that, and there's been some great stuff in here. Is there anything that we didn't talk about or anything that you feel is important to kind of share before we wrap things up?
I have a LinkedIn profile checklist, which I will give you, Jason, that you can give to your listeners and they can have access to that, which might be quite handy. I do have a LinkedIn program if they want something a bit more, but that checklist is a good starting place just to get yourself going and give you the confidence to get back onto LinkedIn and get on following the rubbish on there. Make sure that you're enjoying being on the platform because there's so much opportunity there.
Awesome. Well, I've learned something on this, which is awesome. I think that that's definitely one of the things I was hoping for when I started the podcast. So that's great. I will definitely include a link to that resource in the show notes for this. Thank you so much for carving out some time and sharing your insight. Like I said, I've learned a few things, and I know a lot of my listeners will as well. Where can people find you before we wrap it up?
You can find me on LinkedIn, just under Megan MacNeill, or Instagram, because I do hang out there. You see a lot of my gin on a Friday there, and that's just Relevant Megan. And then there's the website, which is relevantmegan.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Megan.
Well, thank you, Jason. That was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Of course. Absolutely. And thank you to those that are listening. This has been another episode of the Socialistics Podcast. Keep listening, keep liking and subscribing and all that good stuff. Pay attention to your personal brand if you haven't figured that out already. And we'll catch you next week. Thanks.